We're live. How you doing? Yeah, I like the old show. Like I need to buy one of those cinematic clappers. How you doing, Chris Gonto?
All good. What about you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. As many of you know, I'm in a third world country called France, as you said, Gonto. So if this gets too choppy, you take over. Right? That's what you said earlier. Chris, uh, doing strong today. Thanks for joining us. Darius seems to be running a bit late. We'll get started regardless. And so today we're going to talk about the website strategy in 2020, how to make your website your #1 lead gen channel. Obviously, that's going to cover the current situation, um, but I don't want to spend an hour talking, about the crisis. I want to talk, about the actual strategies and tactics that Gonto, myself, and maybe Darius have employed and have seen, let's say, implemented. And we have Darius that just joined us right on the hour. Hey, Darius, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Going great. We just went live. So that's fantastic. Awesome, cool. You guys want to do a quick let's say one-liner intro on each of you while I'm checking the comments and how things are working, and then we'll get started. Gonto, you want to kick us off?
Sure. One liner about me. So I'm Gonto. I'm actually Martin Gontovnikas, but everybody calls me Gonto. I run marketing at Auth0 and excited to talk a bit here about our website and some of the things that we're doing to make basically every person that comes count to generate revenue and happy customers.
Awesome. Chris?
Hey, I'm Chris Newton. I'm with Intellimize, leading marketing here. And our whole company is really around helping our clients figure out how they can get better performance, better conversions out of their websites. My job is to do that on our own website. And so eager to talk about some of the tricks and things we're doing using the Intellimize capabilities, and some other programs we're running as well.
Pretty cool. Darius?
Cool, I'm Darius. I'm head of growth at Airtable. And Airtable is a platform that allows anyone to create collaborative applications that enable their business to build their own workflows. So you can pretty much coordinate anything you want in Airtable. Anything from managing a farm, building a product, leading a marketing team, or even doing video production at Netflix's scale. It's a general case. It looks like a spreadsheet, but it's as powerful as a database and allows you to build your own collaborative application. And so I'm excited to talk with people today about how we figure out how to help people with a relatively complex product that is so powerful versus like other B2B SaaS tools.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Awesome. So today, the topic that I want to cover is around, like, we've been in this shifting situation for a bit over 6 months now, and we've had the time to adapt. We've had the time to make changes. I love for Darius, Gonto, Chris, I'll share some of the examples myself. Like, what changes have we made, and which ones have worked, which ones have not, specifically targeted towards the website. And the reason why we're focusing on the website today is while we were preparing this webinar, this workshop, we thought, like, it's kind of the last thing we have left. Is like the last let's say moat. All right, when you take out like events and you take out like in-person stuff and you take out maybe some paid channels because they're too competitive now, like, last thing you really own is the website. And with CAC rising significantly over the past couple of months, it's become more and more important to focus on like how to make the website work for your audience as a demand gen, as a marketing leader. And so I'm really curious to know, like, what are those changes that you've made? What's been working for you for the past 6 months? Like, what kind of things can you share with the audience? Gonto, I see you nodding, so I'm sure you got a couple of examples you want to share.
Yeah, happy to talk about some. So we've been testing a bunch of things lately on the website to see how they work, which ones do not work, and why. One that we tested out recently that I actually mentioned in our previous get-together was about the getting started at Auth0. Something that we tried that worked really well for us is, let me actually share my screen, is this idea that we have now the email and the getting started. Before, this always went to the sign-up page, but something we're doing now is, for example, if you register with your Gmail account, this will actually continue to go to the sign-up page. But something that we changed is that if you put your work account, by default, it will actually send you to our Contact Us page to discuss the needs based on these together. And this was something that worked pretty well for us. And that's why we ended up implementing it full time. Another one that works pretty well for us is actually having now a two-step both gated content download as well as form fields. We used to have a lot of forms and a lot of fields. So something we're doing now is you enter the email first, you click next. We use Clearbit, Discover.org, Data.com. Basically, if it exists, we use it. And then we grab the most information that we can from there. So then we ask the least amount of possible information to the user. Sometimes it's just the message that we ask. And that was something else that we did that has helped a lot with conversion as well for us. And then lastly, the third one that I have to comment that actually was pretty useful for us is, and I want to share my screen again, is we had, like, in the home, we started as a developer company, and we are still big believers in developers because it's developers who end up implementing authentication. However, the website and a lot of, like, the home specifically, now is much more enterprise focused with what are the value propositions, what are the things that we offer, and quotes and stuff like that. So something that we actually added on now is this idea of a developer page. And this is our new homepage for anybody that is a developer. So from the blog, from our developer properties like Airtable and a few others, we actually just link into this. That is basically a much more interactive way to understand what are the different components. Everything is user focused, and even some things like this, where you can write the company name and it automatically grabs the colors and stuff like that, was another thing that worked very well because people are playing with this, and just based on them playing, we see that when people play with this, it's much more likely that they will either activate or convert to sign up. So we also try to focus a lot in those specific roles.
Awesome, that's pretty cool. And so if you take a step back from those two tactics, how much of your team, I know you have a pretty big team, how much of your team focuses on, let's say, the website part, and how much of your team focuses on the maybe top of funnel demand gen? Where do you put most of your efforts recently in, and how do you decide what to put the efforts?
Yeah, so right now we are, I think, counting marketing ops and design, we are 87 people in marketing or something like that. I would say that specifically working on website, we have something like maybe 12 people, 11 people or something like that. So it's mostly basically 10%, a bit more. It's 15% is focusing on the website per se. In our case, for demand gen right now, counting all, is very close to the same number as well. We've ramped up a lot demand gen as well, even though it's COVID and it's remote and stuff like that, because some of the new tactics that we're doing, like identity over cocktails, or doing a book club with a famous book author, or doing something like a famous chef cooking, has been working. So we actually have a lot more people as well working in those things, but 15% of our org basically focuses on website, and we are currently implementing personalization. That's basically the next step for us in the B2B world on the website.
That's pretty cool. I want to come back to that and personalization specifically to know what you expect from it. But maybe I want to jump to Darius and know at Airtable. And Darius, when did you join Airtable? Was it a bit more of a year ago?
Yeah, that's exactly right. About a year and a month ago.
Yeah, and so you were 6-7 months in when COVID hit. So some history, but not that much. So kind of a new job and a completely shifting situation. Did it change much and for you guys, and how did you react to it? What are some of those learnings 6 months afterwards?
Well, definitely COVID affected a lot of the businesses that run on Airtable. And so insofar as businesses, had to, change how they operated or make some adjustments for COVID, we tried to help them with that. And so we actually launched a COVID email address, like COVID@Airtable, to help people with like one-off needs and to respond to people kind of personally and help them and their teams get through it. And then we also made kind of like a special COVID plan, and we allowed people to extend their Airtable paid plans for a little while during COVID to kind of help them get through these like tough months. And so there's a few things that we've been trying to help with kind of on the more like staying with Airtable side. We also launched a work from home plan that allowed people to have like free access to Airtable for a 90-day period. And that allowed people to really like ramp up, use Airtable to meet their potentially new remote needs as their companies went, completely online and completely remote. And so we launched a number of plans to try to help existing and new customers get through this difficult time. And it's something that we're always thinking about. We just relaunched our student plan that allows anyone at a university to get 2 years free on Airtable and ramp up with that plan. And so, there's a number of plans that we're deploying to help people like use Airtable most efficiently during these times when we understand it's a little tougher for people to pay. And also we understand that people are trying out a number of online services to try to find what meets their needs. And Airtable is certainly one of the ones that especially educators really love, because it allows you to like run your classes remotely, get a lot of volume through the system, and like also send out like forms for homework and surveys and that kind of thing.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I saw quite a few companies like do COVID-specific pricing. I sure did that at a couple of the companies I'm involved with, and it worked like really, really well, especially if it's personalized to a subset of customers who are suffering, and so that worked really well. I think the question, I shared that insight already like a couple of months ago, and the question that I didn't have the answer to then was what's going to be the conversion of those people that enter the product with at scale lower pricing, and like what's the churn going to be, and how those are going to retain over time. And I can say that one of the companies that I'm helping are Gorgeous, so in the e-commerce tech space, the conversion to fully paying from people that got the product for free for extended period of time because they were impacted by COVID is north of 80%, which is really impressive. Now, e-commerce is a bit specific because there was like a significant, there's a quick fall and a quick recovery, right? And so there's a lot of companies that thought that, that had that some of them thought and some of them had real issues, and eventually most of them recovered really well, which is maybe not the case of many other industries. And I know the Airtable covers a lot more space than someone like e-commerce tech does. That makes sense. Like e-commerce, COVID-specific pricing is one of the cool tactics. And so aside from pricing, Darius, if we shift into like where do you put your focus now, again, same question that's forgotten. Like, is it like really like top of funnel and acquisition, or is it like on-site messaging, personalization, and optimization of the funnel?
Well, definitely for the growth team, I just talked about some pricing approaches we were using, and so that's always really exciting stuff. B2B SaaS pricing is exciting, but a lot of it is part of it is just acquisition and activation. Like one thing about Airtable is that once you start using it and you realize how powerful it can be to organize your business, people find that more and more things end up being like an Airtable solved problem, and more things they'd rather actually build an Airtable base than a doc, because it's better parsed, you can reorganize it, it's more scalable, and you can use it for the long term rather than kind of one-off and having it rot. There's just it's so much more powerful to build something in a base. Oftentimes it takes people a little while to like fully get their companies and their mindset around Airtable. So in some ways, COVID is good because we've given like people a chance to like try out Airtable for a longer period of time and give them kind of time to fall in love with it. And it's also something that we are continually working on. One exciting thing about Airtable is that you can use it for so many things. Like even within an organization, HR can use it for one thing, tracking new employees, and then the development team can use it for bugs, and then the feature team can use it for prioritizing new features and doing rollouts. And since you can use it for so many things, one of our kind of forever challenge and goal is to help people onboard for a myriad of use cases. And so one thing we're always doing is, like any great company, like talking to our customers and going deep, but then also doing that, thinking through like these different kind of clusters of use cases. Like, for instance, one cluster is people who are very calendar centric. This could be, a product team or a marketing team or an events team, but there's a number of different use cases of Airtable where it's very important, like what date this is happening on and coordinating around a date. And so for them, making sure they find the calendar view and the Gantt view as early as possible and see how powerful it is, how they can drag and drop things between dates, is really central. And so one thing we do is very early in the funnel, put people through a questionnaire and say, what are you here to use Airtable for? Kind of what's your background? And then from there, try to find out what features and what flows to use to get them activated quickly. And really to show them how Airtable could help them in specific beyond just all the general powerful features we have.
Cool. So that's really like kind of like in product, and it's like Airtable more than most SaaS products like caters to like everyone and every business use case, right? Which is challenging. Like, do you try to like predict what use case a given visitor is going to have? Like you said, those buckets, like the calendar specific bucket, by looking maybe at like what blogs they're reading or like what source they're coming from, and try to like change the experience to push that messaging before pre-sign up, or is that just like too wild, too crazy?
We do try to do it where we can. I'm a big believer in having a great global flow, like just have a homepage that explains what you're doing, and then a basic flow that just helps people understand maybe like the top 3 aspects of what you can do with the service. That way, when you have a word of mouth customer who just heard that Airtable's awesome, they should use it, they find it, they go through the flow, they figure it out. But when we do have more intent from people, for instance, if we find they're searching for a specific subpart of Airtable, or especially if they come in on a certain template, like some people might find our project management template, or my favorite is our growth project tracking template. And if they come in on one of those, we want to give them an experience that's very bespoke for them. It's one of those things where, it's very hard to optimize 1,000 buckets, and there's probably well over 1,000 buckets of different use cases that you can use Airtable for. But we try to find the top ones or top clusters and really super serve them as much as we're able while making a great global experience. So it's always kind of a tension, and it's something I think many horizontal products have figured out over the years, such as Dropbox and other services that you can use for kind of more than one use case.
Yeah, something that we sorry to interrupt, G. Something that we found that is very related to what Darius is saying is, in our case, we found that there's like a lot of initiatives, but also a lot of use cases. So we did focus a lot on the use cases on, okay, how are people using it and why? But we also focused a lot on initiatives, because at least in our case, you don't look for authentication all the time. So it's more about, okay, you're going through a privacy constraint thing, or you're moving your monolithic to the cloud, or you're doing something specific that is driving this. And something that we found is, for the messaging and the content that we send, actually the combination of the initiative of why they are bringing it, and then the use case of what they are trying to do, was the best mix for us. And in our case, it was actually better than industry and better than any other combination to have those two together on specific message. We don't do it in product yet. That's why we're looking to do something with personalization, but at least we do it with nurtures or emails or something similar, as you're saying, to try to like tailor the experience. And for us, it's similar to horizontal. It's hard to pick which use case you go to, and you can do it for all.
Super cool. And so just before we jump onto the personalization like wagon, Chris, like you see like throughout like your like say like SaaS customers and maybe others, like some of the same things we've been seeing. Can you maybe give us like a TLDR of like what are the learnings of the Intellimize customers?
Yeah, so we see all sorts of things people are working on. Personalization is something you highlighted there. It's now that a lot of the in-person things have gone away and people are sending more people to the website through all the different channels that they're using, when someone appears there, you don't just want to have that static website. So the idea of optimizing that and using personalization to speak to each visitor that has each buyer that's there on your site, they've got a different context or different mindset, different concerns. There's some that are actually customers maybe already, but there's others, repeat visitors, sometimes first-time folks. And so, trying a lot of different things to figure out how to engage each one through experimentation, and then using that data to show them a more personalized experience that helps them move down that buyer's path is really the goal. And so we see our customers trying a lot of different things that are helping them achieve some of these things. We work with, you mentioned the B2B, of course, we work with some e-commerce too. It's funny, some of those e-commerce examples are very applicable in B2B. One of those customers we work with is called Jetson, and they do some abandonment modals. So here I can share a screen real quick to show what this kind of looks like. If somebody's thinking about, share screen. If somebody's thinking about leaving the their site, moving away without putting something into the shopping cart, they can pop up a hey, today only there's a special offer. We use this same tactic on the Intellimize site. When somebody's been digging around your product page a little bit and learning about things, and it appears that they're going to leave that site, why not offer a personalized message based upon the content that they've been seeing that maybe allows them to dig deeper in a conversation or a chat or something else, download a white paper or a piece of content that's relevant to that piece of information. So I think one of the great things that folks can do is learn a little bit from some of the examples we see in the e-commerce side and bring them into the B2B world. They're so good at the personalization to get people to get to that checkout. Let's think about using those same ideas to drive people to engage through white papers and requesting a trial or talking to sales and those sorts of things.
Yeah, cool. I want to take a question from Kevin. So I know Kevin O'Leary, actually, a really, really cool dimension marketer. And he has this question for us, which I'm showing on the screen right now, which is, if you're not getting enough traffic to portion of your site, how do you run experiments so that you're waiting months for statistical significance and can feel confident in the results? And I want to share that question both to Chris, because you run a product that has that kind of challenge, and obviously to Darius, because you have the experimentation framework that I use and I love so much, which kind of hinges like how do you pick experiments if you're not sure of the volume you're going to get. Chris, you want to take a stab first?
Yeah, absolutely. Stat-sig is really important if you're running an A/B type of test and you've got a couple different ideas. You're trying to figure out which one is going to be the very best to run on your site as the one thing that people see. Our whole approach to our solution, the way we work with customers, is we don't worry very much about stat-sig. We've got a machine learning approach that we learn with each individual visitor that comes to the site. We're not trying to pick one answer that works for everybody best all the time. We're actually looking for those individual solutions and what's going to be best for people that have some of these shared characteristics as you look across all of the different data that's available to you. Gonto was talking earlier about how they draw data in from Clearbit and a few other things that he mentioned. That's so powerful to help you provide that personalized experience. And so I think chasing stat-sig is actually a way to slow down some of your learning because there's better approaches on how to do this today.
Darius, some thoughts on how you think through that challenge, and especially related to the experimentation of Velocity Engine that you run in Airtable, and how you and your team pick experiments for some maybe channels or parts of the product that might not have enough volume.
Yeah, I mean, some of it, there's almost a continuum between 0 to 1 product development, when you're first starting a website, all the way up to kind of, if you will, Facebook, Pinterest scale of millions of views every hour or what have you. And the reason I draw it so broadly is that when you first start out building a product, all you have is customer feedback. You just show it to someone and say, what do you think about this? And I think in some ways, as you get more and more traffic, you can somewhat look at the numbers, but you still have to rely on that customer feedback. So I feel depending on the scale of your site, you might either be 100% customer feedback, where you're just talking to customers, ideally a representative set. You could start with a customer advisory board and then go towards kind of deploying features to maybe hundreds or thousands of customers and then surveying them or doing interviews. And then you can kind of scale from there and start to look at the data, but use the data simply directionally while still relying heavily on interviews and surveys. And then you can also go all the way up to getting enough volume that you can trust the numbers a little bit more. I think whatever process you start, you should definitely have a good idea of like what hypotheses that you're looking to validate or invalidate based on valid business reasons, because it's very easy actually to be distracted by the data. You could launch an experiment and find that it doubles some weird factor you didn't think about, and then believe that that's actually true. However, if you dig into it, you might find either that there's no reason for the correlation to be, and you probably should throw out the data, or if there is a reason for that correlation, you can dig in and kind of walk the line, like follow the actual people who go from one place to the other to like validate that connection. But either way, you shouldn't take it as face value that you ran this experiment and this number is true. So what I would say, the simple version is if you have lower volume, you can actually talk to your customers more. You can run multiple experiments. And then if you have a few experiments that look positive, you can bundle them up into like one large control and then one large treatment, such that you can actually validate a set of experiments at once that might together go stat sig. Or you can just run them for longer periods of time. Like sometimes when we're running on a low traffic surface area, we might just run it months and months and then kind of come back at a slow boil and see how it's doing. So sometimes simply like time can be on your side, and it's more of a throughput problem than a latency problem as far as getting the experiment done.
So, something to add was Darius was saying, something else that you can try besides the interviews with customers, which I agree with, is when it's a page that doesn't have much traffic, we always try to do and something that is like the complete opposite. For example, a guided tour and a completely unguided, because if it's a big percentage gap, you don't need that much traffic. That was something that at least helped us. And the other thing is, if you do customer interviews and customer feedback, something that also helps us is sometimes we do not need the statistical significance, because we are going to change it unless we see a big drop in metrics, meaning we believe based on feedback that it's much better, and we just do the test to make sure that it doesn't go down 20% or something like that. If that doesn't happen, we just ship it. So sometimes you can also think about it the other way, which is you got the qualitative feedback and I only need a few like samples because I will know if it's a big drop. If not, it's okay.
Yeah, inferior tests are great.
And Darius, I was definitely hoping you would share some of your fantastic parallels about like some experiments outcomes are just obvious by drawing parallels with like street food vendors that you've made quite a few times in the past, with the chefs that cook 100 burgers a day versus those that do 10 a day. And actually, I thought about that recently. I did a post about that, about like some experiments are obvious and the results are obvious, and you don't need to spend time on the stat sig.
Yeah, that's actually really building on Gonto's point, which is a great point, is that when you don't have that much volume, simply do massive experiments. And massive experiments meaning ones that are either going to change the numbers tremendously, positively, or maybe negatively just to learn. But like you can't do like the heading copy change, because like those 1 or 2% changes are not going to come through. So what you can do is, you know, to his point, like you can, instead of taking them to the sign up page, you take them to the sales form. That's a major change. That's going to go stat sig even at low numbers. And the analogy that G is alluding to is people are like, oh, you need to run the experiment for a long time before you really get the numbers right. And so I'm like, well, if you hire 2 chefs and one makes 100 burritos in a day, another one makes 200 burritos, you don't need another day. But if one makes 105, then you need another day. Yeah, one of the ways I break that down is by looking at like how fast things can go stat sig at what percentage, and kind of like breaking down. If you look at one of these stat sig calculators, you can kind of run a few numbers and get those pretty quickly. But like kind of TLDR, like if you only have 1 exposure, you need it to like 5x in order to be stat sig, or 1 success. It's really based on not the number of exposures, but the number of successes. So if you have a lot of successes, you can actually go stat sig pretty quick. And if you do not, you can't, regardless of the exposure volume. And so like if you have, say, 100 per 100, the burrito example, you'd want about like a 20% increase before you feel like, okay, this is probably better. Like a 10% increase on 100 is not going to do it. So, knowing some of those numbers about your own funnel, you can start to get kind of a number of what % increase you need in a reasonable span of time for your business before you can actually like run an experiment on that funnel.
Yeah, and I try to push my team to use those tools ahead of the experiment and more than afterwards. I think we tend to do like some of that too much afterwards and realize that we don't have stats sig like in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I try to push them in the Airtable framework to make an assumption like what the volume is going to be on say either side of the experiment, and how fast we're going to get sometimes some confidence. And I will reject experiments if I feel that the lift is too low and that pushes the timeline too far out, right? Because that's not going to be interesting. And very often say, hey, this is going to be a 20% lift. I say, yeah, but you're unlikely to get any confidence on that within like 2 months, which is it's a moot point by then. And to further that point, like if you look at some of the things that I've been doing in the past couple of months, like I did a rebuild of the website of Gorgias, and we lifted the entire conversion by 50%. And we did that as an A/B test, which is uncommon, right? We launched the old and the new website side by side, which worked pretty well. But the results were really clean. Is what I'd say. However, to be very transparent, there's one of the things that I'm going to share, which is we tested multiple core headlines and value props, right? And we tested, to be very transparent, the success is more revenue. Better success drives more revenue, which is like the long-term visionary, let's say, headline, versus like better success is savings for your team and for your business, right? And for what it's worth, Gorgias does not really have yet strong revenue, say, driving features. The revenue headline performed way better, but, and that's what I want to get to, it actually had negative consequences down the funnel. Because then people realized they were talking to sales, and sales they were saying, oh, so tell me, how does your product help me drive more revenue? And sales were like, well, really not that much, right? And people were like, oh, okay, forget it, fine, goodbye, right? And just, I think sometimes as marketers, like we kind of think a lot about like our own KPIs and our own like services, and we can lift those significantly. But then there's like consequences that we don't necessarily see or are not impacted because these are not all KPIs on the sales territory or someone else's territory, right, the product territory, and like we just push the ball down to them. And so like that's one of the things that I'm thinking more about these days. And I think, Chris, you have some thoughts on like pushing visitors like down the buyer's path, and that's kind of what I'm alluding to here, like the overlap and like how we make those visitors true buyers and not just like signups or demos that don't eventually convert.
Yeah, you raise a really good point here. You're always balancing like the short-term objective. How do I get them to take this initial step or drive that initial engagement? You talk about headlines as a good example to do that. We also tested a bunch of headlines, and it turns out for us the one that was most powerful was one that had a bunch of stats included in the headline. It was a drive an average 46% lift in conversions, which was actually 135% better in conversions on our site to get people to engage with the page and stay. And keep working, relative to where we started with a base description that was far more just a simple description of the solution. And so that initial engagement, that's optimizing for that first step, but then balancing that with the long-term objective. What are we trying to do? We're trying to get more hand raisers on our site for people that are going to want conversations with sales. For us, that's the long-term thing. And so we're looking at measuring the short-term conversions, the micro conversions, what's the next step that they're taking, as well as what happens later on in that process. And as you think about those things, sometimes it's not a linear journey. The person doesn't come to the site and do the whole thing at once. They leave, they come back. And so when they come back, you've got to recognize them and meet them where they are in that journey. Our customer drift does a really nice job of welcoming back customers with a different message in that headline that says, hey, welcome back to the site. You have a friendly little hand that waves at you. And it's a way to kind of restart that conversation. We've got one where we recognize people that have downloaded the ebook. You can follow up with questions out of that, or do they need the next piece of collateral, or that whole concept, though, that you have the opportunity to understand this path and meet people where they are in the path to drive towards that ultimate goal is what we really coach people to do.
Any thoughts?
From my side, on true conversions we've actually been chatting about attribution lately a lot for us, because we used to have inbound and outbound, and now we want to remove the conception of inbound and outbound because we have the growth team fighting for like stuff with the demand gen. So we want to bring them all together to do something like marketing driven. But if we do that, then what does it mean for attribution? So something that to us was interesting related to this is like we ended up seeing that there's no silver bullet for attribution, and we ended up picking, okay, we'll do first touch for some, last touch for some, and then linear attribution. But we're looking a lot more into the growth loops, not in the reforge sense, but more in the sense of people move through the funnel, but then they let somebody else know they are more in the beginning, so they go back, and then they go back, and then they move. So we try now to tag tactics into what step of the funnel it is, and we're looking into relations of order and relations of time difference between them to see if some of them are more effective than others for specific roles and personas, so that then we can drive through them. And that's at least how we start thinking about like the true conversions. It's once they get into pipeline, they have 12 campaigns. Okay, which of them are for each contact? In what order? What time difference? Can we reproduce that, or this doesn't happen at scale as well?
Cool. Yeah, and so I'm passing through the chat to find to see like all the questions, lots of fantastic questions that we have from the audience. I want to ask the panelists while I'm doing that. What does the current user journey look like? Like what kind of like maybe Gonto can tell us like what are those like experiences that you stack horizontally? Like, the way that I think often about that like these days and that I implement is instead of having like a funnel, step by step, we have like less people at each stage. I think more in terms of like horizontal slices, and I'm very French, so I'm thinking of like cakes, right? So like we're moving people from like one side to the other, staying in the same band of messaging, right? The same consistent, coherent messaging. So I try to pick, figure out which bucket, as Darius was saying, like which bucket they're in, and keep them there. So if they come from like for a free product, for a specific industry, a specific role, I will try and persist that messaging at each stage, very horizontally, right? And it obviously traverses the ads, the landing pages, and the website, but also like the sign up, the welcome emails, and onboarding with like app users, stuff like that, right? So like go really from like end to end. And I wanted to know like if some of you guys have been able to implement some of that.
I'm still thinking about cakes. I like that. That sounds pretty good. No, I love the idea of taking the messaging that comes from something like an ad. You can certainly consider the source as people come into the site and where they're from, and use that to drive the message they see. You want that consistent experience, no surprises when they arrive at, hey, this is what I came to see, this is what I'm seeing, and move on and follow from there. That kind of information then, of course, is valuable as you're personalizing other pages throughout the site as they get there. Anticipating the questions that they're going to have that are associated with those types of buyers can be very powerful. I love to get the feedback from sales team or others that are in the field, and they're like, hey, this guy was on our site and he didn't really understand this thing. So trying to figure out where they were coming from and how that helps, and how we can work some of those things in so we can be ready to provide those answers for the groups that care about those things is important. Some people you just know this persona is going to care about things like security, and so letting them know about SOC 2 and what we think about GDPR and CCPA and all these good things. Be ready with that kind of content for that site visitor that cares about that stuff.
Awesome. And we have a pretty cool question from Almat, which is asking, does a lot of text or content on the website drives away the user eventually, or it's all copyrighted and then we have information overload? And I think that's interesting. As we're talking through this cake and those layers, like how do you optimize for like information clarity and not information overload, while trying to like push the right messaging to to the people that you picked on a specific bucket.
Go, Darius.
Yeah, well, one thing about it is, I think, there's an idea in growth where the idea is you just need to remove all the friction. You just need to get out of people's way, and they'll pound through it, and it'll be great. And I think that might be true more and more for like social apps and for very low intent apps, where people are just kind of this bouncing pinball around the site, and you just get out of their way, their small amount of energy will continue through and to some other service. I think it's very different for the kind of services that the three of us are working on. Because if you're going to like change your authentication solution, if you're going to have a dynamic platform for showing different people different things at a like live generated time, if you're going to have a general case solution where you, the user, build out a workflow for tracking your business and actually build your own tools for business success, if you're going to have those services, you have to be high intent. Like you have to put in the work to make it happen. And so I think one way to think about this stuff is not worrying about like everyone who comes to your website and whether they get overloaded or whether a random user feels tired, but think about the people who have either they're going to succeed or they might succeed on your website. Like the people who are going to make it down your funnel and are actually going to pick up the phone when they schedule a call with your sales rep. For those people, like, would they read this information? Is this information helping them understand if they want to take their precious time and invest it in your site? If it is helping them understand, write it, write more of it, write videos, make like a half-hour, Webflow has a university. Usually universities are expensive and time-consuming, but for Webflow, they're worth it because people will put in that time for designers who want to be able to build their own websites. And so like Airtable is the same way. People invest time and they figure it out. And so I guess I have this Psych Framework, and the Psych Framework tries to get at that, where if your content is getting people more psyched, if after reading your content, they have more energy to complete your experience, it's a win. It's not just a question of removing friction so that their existing psych can succeed at the website. It's a question of increasing their psych. So I'd say, like, is your content working for your highest intent users? And if yes, then it's not overwhelming.
And to add to that, I agree 100% with what Darius said. Is something that I think people miss is when you start growing, you start writing like corporate jargon. And like, this is a jihad of me. I just fucking hate it. And something that we constantly talk about with the team is the person who you're selling, if you're a B2B, who might be an executive, or in our case, an enterprise architect, director of engineering, whatever, they're just a human being like us. So I do think you have to think about making it direct, making it like fun, making it easy to understand, and just adding something for the content that I think makes it awesome. Like something that I saw on Stripe that I really liked on their website, for example, was this world. This world, you can just like move them around however you want. And I spent maybe 5 minutes just moving the fucking world. And then after moving the fucking world, I was actually reading their stats and their numbers, which in general I wouldn't give a shit about. But they have this world that is just fascinating, and I was moving it. So those are also some kind of things that I think we can think about. Sorry about the loop of the share. That can make it also more fun to read some kind of things if you have something that is interactive. I think for complex product like ours, like as Darius is saying, I do think that interactivity helps as a good way of generating content as well, and also showing the content in the context of what people want. In some pages, for example, we are reducing content in the page, but adding more content in the chat, because people are then seeing the chatbot based on what they are doing, what they've done before, etc., and that is more personalized to them as well.
Yeah, I did some experiments around that previously at Drift, and one of the interesting learnings we had is on referral landing pages. So product referral virality. So basically, when somebody sees a version of your product live somewhere, so for example, if somebody sees like a live Airtable somewhere and clicks on like this is built by Airtable, in our case it was like there's a Drift chat, and they click on the Drift chat, so this is built by Drift, and they would land on a customized, personalized landing page that says, hey, do you want a Drift chat like the one you just saw, right? And we did like probably 12 or 15 variations of that. And the sad learning is the more we remove text, right, the higher the conversion rate. Eventually, there was just like the form, like sign up here, like you want the same thing, sign up here. There's nothing else, right? Just like an image, and it's just like one line of text. And the conversion rate was really high. But again, then the question is that the people didn't know what they were signing up for. right? They had absolutely no clue what they were signing up for, what was the effort needed to get the product of the value they had in mind. And so like there's kind of that balance. And as Darius was saying, like the Psych Framework versus removing friction, like it's kind of the same thing, right? Like you got to balance like who do you want in your product? Are those the right kind of people? But if they are the right kind of people, like do they get it, and are they mentally ready for what's next? And very similarly, I've definitely played the role of the guy who, as a marketer, over promises on the top of funnel, promises things such as, and we all do that, like get set up in 3 clicks, and your OAuth will be ready, or whatever, right? And which is never true, right? It never takes 3 clicks, right? And so eventually, like the psych, like the goes down because like, all this effort, I'll do it later, right? And so you got to really like be careful, like the over promising. And so when I think back to the question of this person in the audience, like the text overload, like the conversion rate on the page only tells you one thing. Like it doesn't tell you about the value you're creating down the line.
Yeah, just building on that, sometimes I like to take the toughest thing or the real pitch, if you will, and put it as high up as possible. Like one thing about demand gen in general these days is, it's much more about finding your audience than it is about crafting your message when you start to do Facebook ads. I mean, you can improve your message craft by maybe 2x, but you can improve your audience by 10x. You can really hone in on like your people. And I think we can do that with marketing too. I think 2 of my favorite examples, one actually B2B and one hilarious, is like Intercom. One thing they did is they moved putting the code for the Intercom widget. And I'm sorry to use an Intercom example, G, but I'm sure you drift us as well. They put it high up in the path.
Good.
They said it was like the first thing. They're like, yo, put this code on your website. And that's like the hardest thing to do ever. But what happens is it sends at the top of the funnel. Some people are like, fine, I'll do it. They figure it out. And then boom, they're users. They've got the code on their website. And it's very hard, but it actually gets you going. And it immediately takes out all the people who are not going to put in the effort. There's no reason to show them the analytics system they're never going to see because they haven't put the code in. My other favorite example is, spam emails are like often have misspellings in them. And I personally think that they're like intentional because it's like, hey, are you bad at recognizing like poor quality offers? If you are, click here. It's kind of like pre-vetting people for like, ability to like convert them later down the funnel so they can save effort up front. So whatever you do, I think pre-vetting people and getting them to do the hard thing and like effectively self-qualifying them can be really valuable.
Your comment, the beginning one, is very related to what Rahul from Superhuman said, that they had a lot of users, they focused on the ones that really liked it, and then double down, instead of just trying to grab everybody, which I think is good advice.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, like it kind of like, we've all lived, especially all 3 of us, in this sort of like in products that touched ABM, like so account-based marketing in some flavor or another. And these days, I think a lot of what we do, especially for like product growth of products, which is really like where Airtable sits, in kind of like a mass type of ABM, right? Which is really like focusing, honing down on like a specific users. Sure, a larger number than like the 1,000 or 2,000 that ABM lists probably are, but not the entire world, right? Not like anyone who's out there who can just find you, right? And like, if you think in that mental framework, like adopting some of the ABM tactics, especially those that are lower cost for PLG products, starts making like a lot of sense. And we have a question from somebody in the audience again on gamification, and I'll take a spin on that because I'm not so sure about the second part, but I was interested about how you guys think about using gamification strategies to entice the user to do the right thing. So we talked a lot about like how do we push the people to do the right thing. Darius gave us a fantastic example, which is like just put the whole thing up front. Have you guys found sweeteners or psychology tricks to push the people to do the right thing?
One that we do on Airtable is we encourage people, if they have a spreadsheet they've been using to track their data, to upload that to Airtable. Very oftentimes we find that people are using spreadsheets as ad hoc databases. And pretty much if you're using a spreadsheet to track something and it's not simply crunching numbers, it should be an Airtable. And like we realized this for years, and we actually built Airtable because we saw people tracking data so poorly and so hackily and really needing a full database. And we said, let's go build them that database so they can get out of Excel, they can get out of Google Sheets, because everyone's frustrated with that massive Google Sheet with like 50 rows, 30 columns that is just completely overwhelming. And so we encourage people to actually take that spreadsheet that no longer works for them, put it in Airtable, and we'll turn it into like a beautiful database that you can sort, have different views, connect to exterior tools, build a calendar for. And so that's one of those kind of like hard but powerful things that we try to put front and center for the people who do have something to import.
I think on gamification, it also depends a bit on the products. Like for us, for example, we tried gamification for acquiring people and activation, but it doesn't really work because you either need authentication or you don't. And if you don't, if we give you 100 points or whatever, you're still not gonna need it. For us, gamification works, for example, for expansion, which is we sell one project into one company, like one business unit, and then in that business unit, we give the person like points if they share with other people in the company, or they set up a call with us to send them pizza and talk about it. So in our case, the gamification works once we actually have a customer and help us expand, because in return, they can get to go to a conference and basically watch a talk there or do something like that that is useful for them. But at least for us, gamification doesn't work that much, just because in our products, like it won't be gamification that gets them to use them. In other B2Bs and B2Cs, it might make more sense.
So we're thinking about a project right now. It's gamification, though not in the sense of points in the leaderboard. It's about making the interaction kind of fun. A little bit like Gonto highlighted, that globe was just fun to move around and spin what it looks like. We get asked all the time, hey, what are you guys personalizing on your site? Like, what are the pieces that are being driven by the machine learning that have changed for me, and how can you show me those? And I got to see just the other day the initial development version of that, and there's some things we got to clean up to make it cool. But it's really cool to see, okay, here's what I'm getting, and it's showing me these things, and it's actually drawing boxes around this was changed and that was changed. And that kind of engaging content can feel a little bit like a game, because you're discovering things that that weren't immediately obvious just from the base site. So I don't think we always have to think in terms of a leaderboard or points or even rewards that are part of it.
Yeah, I've used just pure like gamification, such as like telling people the best marketers, like our top 10% of marketers, go through onboarding in 10 minutes, and then they just display a clock, and that's it, right? And that just like triggers some of the people who are like challenge driven and like competition driven to go faster than that, right? And there's no other outcome than just like measuring yourself against others, right? And in some other cases, I've done gamification such as giving them more product if they activate faster. So like, hey, like you have a 1 week trial with limited features. You might give them a 2 week trial. You might give them more features if they activate faster than like 1 day, for example. And that's super cool because it costs you nothing, right? And it actually deepens the engagement, the product, both in speed of activation and in like new features or longer trial. And I know we only have like a couple of minutes left today, so I really want to wrap up going back a bit to like website and Legion, and have like some kind of like a very typical like how you guys looking ahead, like maybe like for like the end of Q3 and Q4, like how you guys thinking through like what strategies are like top of mind, what are you guys deploying to like optimize your website to make it your number one like lead gen channel?
From our side, at least, for the website to think about it as the main lead gen channel, we focus a lot on about like what are the right type of leads for the right type of person that comes to the site. We have three main type of leads: either they sign up to the product, or they click in talk to sales and we call them form fields, or they come and they download some of our gated content. So depending on the role, the persona, and how many pages they have seen, we think about what is the right for them, and we try to create this path that is good for them. So for a developer, it's the sign up is always going to be sign up and try the product. But maybe then once they do that, the sign up is invite other people. And for them that you invite, it's talk to sales. So we try to think about like what are the correct lead measurements for all, and think about that. Overall, at least for marketing, the main target continues to be pipeline. That's how we measure if it's good or if it's not good and what does it mean. And then lastly, we are planning now to create this sort of like squad or pod that is around product, marketing, sales, that focuses on the entire holistic experience around they come to the website, they sign up, and what does it mean, so that everybody has a stake in the ground, because marketing will push for pipeline, product will push for decrease of time to activation, sales will push for closed revenue. Can we get them to actually have healthy conflict, and based on the conflict, get a better output out of that?
Yeah, big thing for us is we're thinking a lot about the website. It's not necessarily the number one lead gen source on its own, but it's almost all lead gen goes through the website at some point or other. There's very few interactions that they don't go there. You know, back in the days, if you can remember long ago, we used to have in-person events, and people would, after the event, they shook your hand, talked to you, heard all about it. You showed up some nice video there. They go back to the website to look at what happened. You know, online events like this, people are going to go check out, you know, websites to learn a little bit more. So treating the website, even the homepage of the website, like a landing page, and thinking about how do you make it speak to folks and engage them and quickly determine what they need so you can get them on that right buyer's path is a thing we've been talking a lot about. And you marry that idea with the one I spoke of before, being proactive about, you know, being ready to answer the top questions that you hear, and doing it through this website channel are really a big focus for us right now.
Totally agreed on the importance of like connecting like growth with sales and with marketing. In many ways, I think of growth as like other teams' friends in product. Like I'm a growth person that is very product centric. I don't like come from the marketing side. I come from like actually engineering background and like building stuff. But I really think that like we are so aligned as far as goals go. So that I really think kind of smoothing out those channels, and to Gonto's point about like, you know, having those different mentalities of like, how do we close sales versus how do we activate customers versus how do we drive signups? Like those are all parts of the same funnel, and, you know, but are still like different optimizations. And, you know, they're all lines pointed in the same general direction of up and to the right, but kind of at different angles, that if you can line those up, you have a much more powerful straight funnel, so to speak. So I think it's kind of a high level vague point, but maybe an action item there is just making sure, you know, even taking your most growth centric salesperson and your most sales-centric growth person, and kind of maybe pairing them up into a bit of a tiger team to see if there's something dropped on the floor. And I guarantee you there are things dropped on the floor, because growth doesn't talk to people as much as sales. Sales doesn't optimize for, you know, the gross, the very large numbers as much as growth. So there's always going to be something in the middle there where you can like talk to a person or look at a number that hasn't been evaluated before and find an opportunity. One super tactical one I'll leave here is just one thing we've been doing is actually just optimizing our email click targets. And I don't mean the targets in the email, but like once you click from an email, that's actually a relatively high volume source of getting people back to the website. It's the only thing you get really if you kind of like give up or get distracted or what have you. And so we've been trying to make sure that our click targets in our email go straight to highly valuable in product like functional areas, so that after you click that you want to, you know, watch a video or do an import or something, we drop you on a page where you could take a secondary action, and then the primary action is like in a modal on top of the page, so you can instantly interact with it. So if you want to do that import, it's just one click to upload. After you watch the video, like you actually happen to be on the page where you could action the contents of the video. You could go start a base, you could go invite someone. And so really trying to line up, you know, the emails with a direct path to successful action.
One last thing that I want to add is, can you see my screen? Something that we used internally a lot now is sales, and a lot of the teams thinks are a funnel. Like, yeah, they move from one to another, but just trying to educate people on all of the things that happen in every step of the funnel and how they actually go back and back and back all the time, and how that creates these internal loops where maybe one person invites another and then it goes back to another place of the funnel. has been another thing that has helped us, because everybody in the company needs to think that it's not static. And based on the fact that it's not static, what does it mean about the relations, what they do, and how things like come back and then forward again?
Damn, I want to close on what you guys just said. Both of you is fantastic, and Gonto, I have to get those slides, those internal slides. Those graphs look so fire. So thank you all three, Chris, Darius, and Gonto, for your time today. Lots of cool learnings. I will extract those, put them in a post, and yeah, I hope everyone in the audience got a kick out of it and some cool learnings. Thanks. See you around.
Thank you for inviting.
Thanks, guys.